Could a nation under suffocating restrictions actually make the world's leading superpower tremble? Join Planet Expedition as we decode the geopolitical secrets behind the fortress of Iran. A place where geography is not just destiny, but a haunting weapon of survival. Don't look away, because the conclusion will completely shift how you perceive the world. Look deep into the map of the Middle East, where the flat deserts of Iraq meet the sun-scorched peninsulas of the Gulf. Amidst that monotonous golden backdrop, a strange entity emerges, a massive, rugged plateau, enclosed by towering mountain ranges like the fortress walls of a forgotten world. This is Iran. For decades, especially during the Trump era, this nation has been labeled a regional bully, a specter spreading dread from the Mediterranean to the Arabian Sea. But have you ever wondered why a country surrounded by dozens of foreign military bases, shackled by the most severe economic measures in history, can make the world's #1 superpower and its wealthiest allies feel so uneasy? Welcome back to Planet Expedition. Today, we will peel back a truth hidden beneath layers of political dust. What you are about to hear is not a story of reckless leadership, but a grand escape by a prisoner confined within their own fortress. Iran didn't simply choose to be aggressive, they are performing a painful survival reflex. Is this status as a regional powerhouse a proactive choice? Or is it actually a desperate cry from deep within the Rock Mountains to avoid being strangled? We are facing a geopolitical secret that, if misunderstood, leaves you unable to grasp why the Middle East never stops bleeding. Keep your eyes on the screen, because the end of this story will change your perspective on the current world order. Before we dive into this dramatic geographic dissection, if you are someone who craves exploring the hidden corners of the world map, hit the subscribe button for Planet Expedition right now. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to keep digging deeper and bringing you sharper, high-quality videos in the future. Now, put yourself in a high-stakes situation. If you were the leader of a nation surrounded by enemies 100 times stronger, which path would you choose? Reflect on this and leave your thoughts in the comments by picking the answer you find most strategic. A. Accept withdrawing into your fortress. Implementing peaceful policies in hopes that enemies will loosen the circle to develop the domestic economy. B. Actively reach outward, creating indirect frictions in the neighborhood to push the battlefield far from your borders. Accepting a global label of aggression in exchange for the safety of your heartland. Pick A or B? Comment your answer now, as it is the key to entering the next part of our journey in decoding the Persian fortress. To understand why a nation would accept being turned away by the world to choose such a thorny path, we must step through the gates of the Persian fortress and look at the stone walls that have forged their fate. Nature granted Iran a cruel favor when designing this land as an entity completely isolated from the rest of the Middle East. With a massive area of over 1.6 million square kilometers, Iran is not merely a country, but a grand natural stronghold built of solid rock and towering peaks. To the west, the Zagros Mountains rise like a massive stone dragon, separating the Persian plateau from the silty plains of Iraq. To the north, the Alborz Range, with peaks exceeding 3.000 meters, cradles the heart of Tehran, forming an impenetrable defensive belt against any land-based incursions. This, easy to defend, hard to attack, terrain has saturated Persian thinking with a stubborn confidence for thousands of years. They know that whether it was Alexander the Great, the Mongol hordes, or the most modern armies of today, sending infantry to occupy the central Persian highlands has always been a logistical nightmare and a nearly impossible mission. These stone walls have protected the Persian identity, keeping it from being dissolved amidst the surrounding populations. But nothing in life is free. Geography gave Iran the sturdiest shield while simultaneously stripping away the wings to fly far. The very fortress that protects them so well has unintentionally become a natural confinement, making it extremely difficult for Iran to trade or connect naturally with the outside world. Living in a reinforced stronghold, the Iranian psyche is always that of the besieged, an obsession with isolation that is etched into their veins. This obsession is not paranoia, it was tempered through the bloody lessons of modern history. Look back at the conflict from 1980 to 1988, a most brutal chapter showing Iran's geographic vulnerability despite its high mountains. When the opposition took advantage of the flat terrain at the southwestern border to strike directly at the vital oil fields in Khuzestan, Iran paid the price with 1 million lives to protect every inch of land. That struggle was painful proof. High mountains only protect the heart. But they do not protect the economic arteries if an enemy is standing right at the doorstep. The leadership in Tehran learned a lesson they would never forget: they have no brothers of the same language or ethnicity to lean on. And if they only huddle behind the mountains, they will be strangled until their internal strength is exhausted. Therefore, a safety paradox emerged: to keep the fortress peaceful, Iran could not just sit and wait for conflict to reach the mountain gates. They understood that the best way to prevent the fortress from being blocked was to create distant outposts, extending the defensive borders by thousands of kilometers. The absolute safety within the stone plateau provided the leverage to reach their influence outward. While neighboring countries live on flat, exposed, and highly vulnerable deserts, Iran sits comfortably behind its ramparts to project networks of power. It was a grim choice: either become a peaceful nation surrounded until death, or become a thorny entity, ready to provoke from afar to ensure survival at the center. And as we have seen, Iran chose the latter, turning its mountains into not just a sanctuary, but a launchpad for an ambitious survival strategy. Realizing that high mountains could only stop an invading army but not prevent economic and geopolitical strangulation, Iran took a bold step, turning isolation into a clever long-range offensive strategy. Instead of pouring billions into stealth aircraft or massive carriers, assets that would be neutralized by superior air power in the first hour of an engagement, Tehran chose a less expensive but much more strategically lethal path: building living shields abroad. This is the origin of what is known as proxy warfare, an asymmetric military art where Iran does not hold the gun directly, but every breath and barrel of armed groups across the Middle East is directed toward their interests. Imagine Iran as a grandmaster sitting safely in a closed room, yet their pieces are present everywhere, from the valleys of Lebanon and the deserts of Iraq to the burning shores of Yemen. Their philosophy is simple: if you want to protect the Persian fortress, turn the neighbor's house into the battlefield. By nurturing and supporting various regional groups, Iran has pushed the risk of conflict thousands of kilometers away from its borders. When enemies wish to strike Iran, they must first get bogged down in endless struggles with battle-hardened locals who know the terrain perfectly. This is not just a military tactic, it is a painful expansion of defensive borders for neighboring nations, but a guarantee of survival for the heart of Tehran. To materialize this power, Iran has quietly built a vivid geographic entity called the Land Corridor, a strategic breathing tube running from Tehran through Baghdad and Damascus to Beirut. This road is not just a transport route, it is a military Silk Road, allowing Iran to move assets and personnel out to the Mediterranean coast without ever having to face the carrier fleets patrolling the Gulf. To analysts, this corridor is the sharp blade that Iran holds to the throat of regional rivals. And one of the most ironic truths of modern history is that Washington inadvertently became the trailblazer for Iran. When the 2003 intervention removed the previous regime, it accidentally shattered the strongest barrier between Iran and the Arab world, creating a massive power vacuum that Iran immediately flooded like an unstoppable tide. The presence of Iran in Syria or Iraq is not merely an old-style imperial expansion, it is the establishment of outposts to ensure the Persian fortress is never blocked again. Every time you hear news of a rocket launch from Yemen or a clash at the Lebanese border, understand that is how Iran uses a tiny geographic lever to keep the wealthiest superpowers awake at night. They have turned surrounding nations into a buffer zone, a living shield for which the price is regional stability. But for Tehran, it is the price of survival. When you push the battlefield far away, you gain more space and time to manage within your mountain stronghold, turning an opponent's encirclement into a game of attrition where the one holding the geographic choke points is the one in control. However, the strategy of extending influence through external groups would only be an incomplete script if we failed to mention the two most brutal geographic nodes where Iran directly confronts entities that threaten its existence: and Israel with no strategic depth, and the Strait of Hormuz, which holds the energy fate of the planet. The confrontation between Iran and Israel is one of the strangest and most tense chapters on the world map. Because in reality, they are separated by over 1,000 kilometers and do not share a single meter of border. But in geopolitics, physical distance is sometimes a meaningless number when ideology and power collide. Israel, a modern and wealthy nation, lives in a fearful geographic paradox. It has a very small area, and a single step back means falling into the Mediterranean Sea. For Tel Aviv, any Iranian presence right next door through affiliates is an existential threat. Conversely, Iran understands this vital weakness perfectly. They don't need to send troops for a direct assault but simply use the geography of neighbors to hem in the opponent, turning them into a permanent hostage in the Middle Eastern power game. While the mental battle with Israel takes place in the shadows of cyber strikes and proxy friction, in the south, Iran holds a powerful staff that can paralyze the entire global economy, the Strait of Hormuz. Look at the map to see the cruel favor nature bestowed upon Tehran. All the massive oil volume from regional giants wanting to reach the ocean must pass through a narrow gap only about 33 kilometers wide at its tightest point. And Iran owns the entire northern coast of this node. This is not just a shipping lane, it is the jugular of the world's energy, where 20% of global oil flows daily. Iran doesn't need a massive carrier fleet to face off here, they only need fast boats, guided missiles, and thousands of sea mines to turn these waters into a lethal trap for slow-moving tankers. Iran's cunning lies in asymmetric tactics. They use low-cost weapons to bargain against trillions of dollars in global value. Whenever the pressure of restrictions from Washington becomes too suffocating, Tehran reaches for the throat of Hormuz as a cold reminder: if Iran cannot sell oil, no one in the Gulf will sell oil peacefully. This is an open hand of cards where geography becomes the ultimate weapon, allowing a besieged nation to sit at the head of the international negotiating table. Iran has transformed itself from the cornered party into a player who can checkmate anywhere, using the opponent's own geographic weaknesses to cover the cracks within its own internal structure. It is the combination of pinning the opponent at the border and holding the energy lifeline at sea that has created a geopolitical stalemate, one that remains an unsolved puzzle for every administration. As the geographic nodes in the Middle East gradually become nooses tightening around the economy, Iran realized that to avoid being strangled in its fortress, it had to perform a grand pivot toward the east, where new geopolitical avenues are opening. If the Zagros Mountains confined Iran in a cramped space with the west, that same terrain opens a massive escape hatch into the heart of the Eurasian continent. This is no longer a game of small external groups, but the formation of a new power axis: Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing. For China, Iran is not just a massive fueling station providing stable energy, but an irreplaceable strategic piece in the Belt and Road Initiative, positioned at the central hub connecting Central Asia with the Persian Gulf and Europe. Iran is the land bridge that helps Beijing reduce dependence on the Strait of Malacca, which is always under the watchful eye of the ocean-going powers. A 25-year strategic cooperation agreement has turned this geographic intersection into an economic shield, where capital and technology flow in exchange for energy security and a loyal ally at the world's oil hub. Meanwhile, the relationship with Russia carries a more military and direct confrontational tone toward the old order. Sharing the Caspian Sea and enduring similar external pressures, these two nations have found each other in a calculated symbiosis. The world was astonished to see specialized drones appearing over Eastern Europe, a testament that Iran has shattered the bars of isolation to become an entity impacting global security. The international north-south transport corridor connecting India to Russia through Iranian ports is the defiant response to external sanctions. It is not just a logistics route, it is an assertion that geography has forced continental powers to find each other to break the dominance of the oceans. Deep in the shadows of military alliances, the relationship between Iran and North Korea creates a strange symbiosis between two prisoners of the international system, separated by half the globe but meeting at a single point: total encirclement. The exchange of personnel and missile technology has created an underground connection network that no carrier fleet can block. Formally joining regional cooperation organizations and the BRICS bloc are the final pieces of the puzzle, confirming that Iran no longer stands alone against threats. Now, their vision has moved far beyond being the gatekeeper of the Gulf. They crave to be a coordination center for a new multipolar order. Geography gave Iran the hard rock of the mountains to endure pressure. And now, that same geography is providing massive allies to start a larger game, where the world map is being redrawn by minds that refuse to submit. The confrontation in 2026 is no longer just between Iran and a single superpower, but a collision between one side wanting to maintain the old order and another using every geographic crack to create a new reality. Looking back at this entire fiery geopolitical picture, we realize that Iran is not a simple problem of good versus evil, but a living testament to how people and nations must adapt to survive before the destiny of geography. The resilient Zagros Mountains may confine them in solitude, but they also forged an indomitable spirit. From building living shields abroad and holding the energy jugular of Hormuz to shaking hands with the giants of the East, Iran has proven that when pushed against a wall, the wise will not just try to break it, but will turn that very wall into a launchpad to change the game. The world of 2026 and beyond will witness many more fiery collisions, where stealth technology and modern military algorithms will face off against the power of rock mountains and continental alliances. Iran has chosen a thorny path, a journey from the besieged to a master player on a multipolar board. Regardless of how you view them, it cannot be denied that the ability to fully exploit geographic cards has helped Iran stand firm against the greatest storms of modern history. The profound lesson is this: geography is destiny, but how we interact with that destiny determines our position. In life, each of us has our own mountain ranges of barriers. It could be family circumstances, limited resources, or disadvantages from the surrounding environment. Instead of blaming unchangeable adversities, learn to turn them into a defensive advantage and seek out new corridors to reach further. How to apply this to life: never let isolation exhaust you. When one door closes, actively pivot, just as Iran looked toward the east. Build for yourself support networks. Hold a key skill that the market cannot do without. And always be ready to change your mindset to adapt to a multipolar reality. Success does not come from having a perfect starting point, but from knowing how to use your very flaws to create the sturdiest position. Before we close today's video, we really want to hear your perspective. In your opinion, between the power of high-tech weaponry and the endurance of natural terrain, which factor will decide victory in future conflicts? Please politely leave your thoughts in the comments. We always cherish all feedback from the community. And if you found these analyses helpful, don't forget to hit subscribe for Planet Expedition to support us with the motivation to produce more profound and high-quality content. Thank you for joining us.